Marisela, welcome to the podcast today. Thank you so much for coming in.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I'm excited to see what we're gonna put out there.
Yeah,
And
it's gonna be good. I've been looking forward to this conversation because I've been seeing what's been going on in the news. And you are the chairwoman for the Caldwell School District School Board.
correct.
And so I wanted to kind of just to get the conversation started, I wanted to hear a little bit. I wanted you to tell me a little bit about Caldwell because I'm a former school board member from the Lewiston School District.
Okay.
Yeah. And so when I served on the Lewiston board, if someone was like, hey, tell me about Lewiston, I just, would rattle off a few things. And one of the things that I've learned in being in the state of Idaho is that our school districts look different and our communities have different things that they're dealing with and all sorts of stuff. And Caldwell, for example, I know is geographically it's large because when someone has a Caldwell address, they could actually be in one of three different school districts, which is Middleton. You can have a Caldwell address and be in Middleton, in the Valley View School District, or Caldwell. Are there any other ones? Am I missing anything?
You can also, well, there's a lot of, like you said, territory that covers the 83605, 83607 zip code. And a lot of those also, yeah, they're close to the Snake River, kind of close to Marcine, where Lizard Butte is at. And so, yeah, and those are Valley View school districts, but, I guess parents, if they wanted to, could go to, enroll their kids in Marcine and even Wilder. But yeah, it's a huge territory.
Yeah. So tell me about Caldwell. Tell me a little bit about Caldwell.
Okay, so Caldwell is home of Simplot. We had the first potato processing plant out there, one of the very first ones. And then it's also one of the best soils for seed. So we have a lot of seed companies out there. It's very agricultural. And then we also have the Caldwell Night Rodeo, which is one of the best rodeos in the nation. So, but it's also small town. To me, it's small town USA. Caldwell is where I was born a long time ago. And, and it has developed in certain ways that, we like, for example, the hospital I was born in is no longer there. There's a different hospital. So there's a lot of renovations going on, a lot of improvements in downtown. We're now known for our Indian Creek Plaza, which is a great restoration of downtown Caldwell. And, like I said, it's a hometown feel. It is the home of the College of Idaho. And so, we just recently got our football program back that had stopped for many years. And we have a great basketball program with the College of Idaho. And so it's well-rounded. We have a little bit of everything. And, we have our percentage wise is, I think about 35% Latinos that live in Caldwell in the city area. And then, the rest are a mixture of different, mostly white folks. And so, yeah, it's a, like I said, small town, hometown feeling. I love Caldwell. It's my town.
It's your town. I love that. And then, so tell me then, so you graduated from Caldwell High School?
I did. So my mom was born in the Rio Grande Valley in South Texas. My dad was born on a border town of Texas on the Mexico side. But they were migrant workers, and so they met in Caldwell at the labor camp. So, yeah, back in the 60s, the early 60s, they met there. And then they got married and started building their family. And so my first residence was at the Caldwell Labor Camp. And when I was born, Lyndon B. Johnson was president. And so one of his programs was, fighting poverty. And so one of the programs that he started with was Head Start. So Caldwell had one of the very first Head Starts in the nation, and it was ran by Janie Ward Ingle King's mom, Louise Ward. And so that's a great connection. And I still have my diploma when I graduated from the Head Start there at the labor camp. And for me, I believe that was the start of my love for education, because at that point in time is when I thought, okay, these words, these doodles on masking tape that's in a cup that I use to brush my teeth, that's my name. That's me. That's the first time I'd ever really individualized that means me, and that I was a person, and that I was supposed to be brushing my teeth every day.
Yeah.
So
So a couple of context things. When you say Janie Wardle King, you're talking about
Senator Wardle King.
Wardle King from the Boise
King Ward.
the Boise area, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Yes. Okay. That's really cool. So her mother was did you say the head of the Head Start program?
Yeah,
here?
she was the principal. She started that program there in the Caldwell Labor Camp, one of the very first Head Start programs in the state of Idaho.
That's really cool. I love that. Oh, I just love these connections to hear about stuff like that around the state. And then share what a labor camp is, because I think a lot of people don't know.
Okay, so the labor camp in Caldwell, a lot of the labor camps were started with President Roosevelt when, we had with the Midwest states where, they had the drought and they couldn't, they were moving to the West, and it was like, okay, how can we help these people? The Grapes of Wrath story. Okay. And so there was a bunch of labor camps that were built, and a lot of these folks came, and they started helping those folks kind of transition into housing where they hadn't had a lot of housing before. They lost their farms in the Midwest. And so, and there's a lot like at Hoover Dam, when Hoover Dam was built, and then Cooley Dam, when that was built, there was labor camps all over. And so this one particular in Caldwell was built in 1938 or so. And it just transitioned from being a labor camp for those folks that were there. And then later on, they were used when we had the Second World War. And then when the Japanese American brothers and sisters were moved inland. And then after they were released, it was like, okay, where can we go work? And it was at, the Caldwell labor camp had housing. And there's a great book written about the Caldwell labor camp. Mike Dittenberg wrote this book, and he put together a lot of data and information. And I was really surprised because I didn't know this story. And I started looking at the pictures, and I said, when was there Japanese Americans here? But I remember my mother telling me when she was young that there was a big barn there at the labor camp, and there was boxes, but there was a lot of pictures of, and she thought they were just Asian people, and she didn't know who they were. And I always wondered as a kid, I wonder what happened. But then all this started making sense. And then after the war, there was a lot of shortage of stoop labor, and mostly for sugar beets, because of Amalgamated Sugar Company needed stoop labor, and so did Simplot for processing of the potatoes. And so there was a lot of recruitment done in South Texas, and that's how my parents and my grandparents come to Idaho, and then they were able to use the housing there at the Caldwell Labor Camp. And that's how a lot of at first, it was a lot of Mexican Americans from the southern Texas border, because they were recruited by Amalgamated Sugar Company to come.
Okay. This is so fascinating to me, because when you talk about even this is just so interesting. I love history. I started as a history teacher, and my husband and I have been taking our kids around the state of Idaho to see different things that just are in the state, because there's a lot of cool things that are around the state of Idaho. And I grew up on the coast of Oregon. And so a couple of years, I'll just say a year or two ago, we took our kids to the Minidoka internment camp.
Yes.
And that's just off of Highway 84 for anyone that is interested in taking their kids. It's a really cool historical facility. They've done a nice job in keeping it up, and they've got a great visitor center. Have you been?
I haven't, but I want to.
Yeah. So we went there, and actually before I had gone, I had grown up with the story. My grandfather is from Germany, and he came over right before World War I broke out. And so he was in the States, and it was really hard for him because they didn't like America didn't like the Germans, and he was German. So he did different things, and then he made his way over to Alaska. And so then anyways, after World War II had ended and all those different things, he was in Astoria, Oregon eventually. And that's where he and my grandmother got married. They started having kids. Well, after World War II ended and they started, the United States started releasing, opening those internment camps, my grandfather didn't like that those internment camps were there. And he wanted to help because they had to either be sponsored out or they had to have a job in order to get out of the internment camps. And so my grandfather actually sponsored a family out of the Minidoka internment camp.
Oh, wow.
And brought them up to Oregon, gave them a place to work and live and do all of those different things. And so walking around the internment camp was really meaningful to me.
Yes.
And they have a couple of barracks that are still up, and we took our family in. And as the tour goes around, you walk in and you see who is the size, like what it was like living in there, and the sheets that were up and all those different things. And it was just really moving to me because my aunt had told me how she felt so connected to this family that her father had sponsored out of the Minidoka internment camp. And so when you say then that, gosh, this labor camp that your parents started, met at, and that camp was also a place for our Japanese American, as I love how you say that, like our Japanese American, do you say brothers?
Brothers and sisters.
Brothers and sisters. I love that. So that was a place for them to be able to come out to because they didn't have anything. They didn't have anything left after that. So that's just really fascinating to me. The history of it all coming together. Thank you for sharing that. That's really fascinating.
Absolutely. And, the Caldwell Labor Camp is now, just because, the change of the name, because, we want to, it's a village. So it's now called Farmway Village. And so it's still run by Mike Dittenberg, and they do amazing things there. And like I said, my parents met there at the little store, and the little store is still there. And, and so I remember, just the first time that, we were taught, to sing God Bless America. And then, the words, amber waves of grain and purple mountains majesty. And up on the, around the room were pictures of what amber waves of grain look like and purple mountains. And I thought, so there was so much connection because they used a lot of pictures. And, and now as a kid, I could see it, but now I understand, how we need to make connections to help our kids get educated. And so it was the start of, my being curious about things and just being curious. And then I believe that's why also my dad was a farm labor contractor. So he would talk to farmers, and it was the job that his dad did as well, my grandfather. And so he just took over as, as the age progressed, as my grandfather got older. But, I was always the one that, there's always the one kid that picks up a little bit more detailed. And so I was the one that would go with him sometimes to talk to the farmers, sometimes to, go challenge a bill on his phone, on a charge on his phone bill, or go to the doctors to help translate before the HIPAA rules or the laws, that you can't speak about certain things to other people, or there has to be translations or translators at different medical facilities. But yeah, I was the one person, and it was hard because, it's hard when you're a kid and you confuse gallbladder with a bladder. Right. It's totally different. It's not the same. Grandma was not happy.
Yeah. Also, that really happened to you.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh,
yes. I went with my grandma, and she had a bladder infection, and I said gallbladder in English, and because that's what I knew what to say. And then grandma was like, "No, it's not there. He started doing an ultrasound on my belly. No, it's down there." And I'm like, "Oh, grandma, that's embarrassing." But, and then also with my dad, I went with him, and the doctor says, well, the next time he comes in, you need to let him know that he's going to have a prostate exam. And, as a kid, I said, so what's that? So I can tell my dad. And when he told me, I said, I can't tell my dad that. And he says, why not? He said, because of respect, I can't say that to my father.
Right.
So I was, sometimes I would get tired. Like, my uncles have children that speak English. Why don't they go? But I think it was just the fact that I just was more detailed, and it was important to me to make sure that people understood. And I got, it was a challenge to me to make sure that the words were translated correctly. And so as I grew older, people kept coming to me because I would help my father with his payroll. I'd help my father when, they had to have W-4s and I-9s and, it was like, well, how do we do this? Because we don't have an office. And I'd sit at the ditch bank and start filling out paperwork because my office was a clipboard and a pen. And I just, went down in the fields and just, started taking everybody's information and getting their paperwork and, for the farmer. And so it was, now there's different avenues that they use to get all that done. But in the beginning, we just had to work through it. And I was that person that could speak the English. And my dad would tell me, okay, we're going to go talk to, they want to talk to us with the Department of Labor about how we're going to do this. Come, you need to come with me. And I thought, well, I want to work in town. I don't want to do this because, this isn't going to be like the job that I want to inherit. But I always thought, who's going to help my father? Mm-hmm. So it taught me to be in places where teenagers usually weren't. Mm-hmm. And it taught me that when my ears get red, that's when I need to stand up and speak. Yeah. It was something that would trigger me like, no, they have that wrong. No. And I just think, no, this is when I have to stand up and speak. Mm-hmm. And so I learned at a young age to advocate for people who couldn't, talk for themselves. And I just, there's hardworking people that all they want to do is have a better life, which is what everybody that came to America that wasn't originally here wanted. And so, for me, it was, I have to help these folks that don't speak the language. And I think that's why I put myself out there. That's why I have the job that I have, because I'm bilingual and I work with a title company and I'm able to help them with their closings and understand that the biggest investment they're making in their life of purchasing a home, they will understand every step of the process because I'll speak to them in their native tongue. And also as a school board member, I thought, well, there needs to be representation. And why does it matter? Because we all need representation. We all need to have our story heard. And we all need to realize that just the way that somebody thinks things should be may be a little skewed on, I'd like to say we all know everything, but we don't. Mm-hmm. And even myself, I think I am good with advocating, and then I'll speak to my Indigenous friends, brothers and sisters, and I think, oh my gosh, I'll go to classes about, just minority groups, and I thought, okay, what are they going to show me? Because I know I can tell them a few things, and I sit there and I'm awed because I've learned something new that I never knew. And so we have to have that open mind. And I've always felt that way. But for me, it's just being an advocate for people that don't know how to speak or that are scared to speak. And for me, it's just, I've had that in me ever since I was a little kid.
One of the things I just kind of like an aha moment while you were talking was that, I have been a parent who's been an advocate in the education system. My oldest is like off at college. And one of the things that I, have seen over my tenure as a parent is the change from, just providing English material for parents in English to providing materials in Spanish as well. And, particularly in Idaho, where we have a large Hispanic community. And I grew up in a small town in Oregon, and my dad owned a farm with his sister, and it was a very large migrant community. So I was very accustomed, I grew up around Hispanic people. And I grew up with, I'd be in the farm office and there would be 20 people would come in and I would watch, one of my family members say, okay, who speaks English, and the one person was there. And as a child, I always felt very grateful for the one person who spoke English in that group, because for me, I thought, gosh, that person's really helping us right now because all of these people are here to work and they're good workers. Mm-hmm. I mean, I saw it in action myself, right? And we need them here. Mm-hmm. We need them here to work and they're good and they're contributing to the farm as a whole. And then that person who can speak English, who's, bilingual, who speaks English and Spanish is really helping us out as well. Because right now, none of us speak Spanish. We're not fluent in it, And so, But one of the things, and I actually heard, so I'm the president of the Idaho PTA, like the Idaho Congress of Parents and Teachers.
Okay.
Yeah, and I was listening to one parent talk about in a smaller rural community that have some Hispanic people that, when they're putting out their material, one of the things that they said that they did, because they didn't have any parent leaders who were Hispanic, but they had parents in their school community who were Hispanic. And it was important for this PTA to get the information to those families as well. And so they actually, like this one parent was saying, she was like, well, we're trying to use our resources and stuff. And so we actually reached out to a college student who is bilingual, who helps us translate the material for our Hispanic families. And I was like, that is so awesome. Like, I loved hearing about it. But then kind of the aha moment that I've had while you've been talking here is what it's like for a child who speaks both Spanish and English, and then, has parents who aren't fluent in English, and almost like the pressure that it must feel like for them. Because you kind of described that a little bit. And we have families in Idaho today whose children have those experiences. And I just feel like you're speaking to that experience of kids who are in our world today, right now, here in Idaho.
Oh, absolutely. My dad was, for a Mexican, he's a really tall man, 6'1". And I thought, well, you must have gotten the cereal with the 12 fortified vitamins, or something, because you're really tall. But he was tall, and I think that's what helped him, be a leader. But one of the things that helped him be a leader. But, he would say, we'd go to, back when you could go to the phone company, and he would say, I tell them that this charge is not my charge. And, and I was a little kid, and the counter was up to my nose, and my dad would, and I would say, my dad said that this is not his charge. And he said, no, but tell them that I'm mad. Tell them I'm really mad, because this is not the first time it's happened. And my dad said that he's really mad. And, so it was hard, because it was traumatic to, as a little kid, to be forceful, and, and here you are trying to help your parents, and they want you to be strong, but you're just a kid. Mm-hmm. So it was really hard. And so I always thought we need to see more people that speak Spanish in professional places. And we are because, and I think a lot of the times we just didn't feel like we belonged in certain places. There are some times that we get the feeling of imposter syndrome, like, who do you think you are, trying to be in this place where you're not even accepted, or you've never been here. But then we have to work through that and say, no, we belong. We belong here. And that's one of the biggest things that, that's one of the reasons that I was recruited to be in the school board in 2017, because they said, we just need color on the board, because our community is 35% Latinos, but our school is at that point was 60% Latinos. Yes. And so it was, and I said, okay. And, and once I'm the type of person, Alexis, that, we have all this information at our hands with our phones, Google and everything. And I thought, okay, well, what does a trustee look like? Mm-hmm. Because I thought, okay, they want me to be a trustee. So by golly, I'm going to be the best trustee ever. And I'm going to research, and, and if I'm going to do this job, I want to know what I have to do and what I need to know. And so I started looking up trustees in my old school district in Eagle Pass, Texas, and read about them. And I started thinking about, okay, San Antonio, Texas, Chicago, Washington, just all around the country. And I noticed that everybody had initials after their names, or like letters after their names. And I thought, oh my gosh, so all these people are educated. And so backing up, when I grew up, I wanted to go to college. It was one of my dreams, but that was in 1983. My dad, he would say, okay, you've got to work, old school. You go to work, hand over your paycheck until you get married. So you're just going to hand over your paycheck. And so And so, his thought was like, okay, I'll give my kids, make sure that they get an education, high school education. And because he knew that there was a law that said that kids have to go to school. Now, if he knew that the age was 16, he could have pulled us out and said, you're going to work in the fields. But we kept telling him, no, we have to graduate. And so he's like, okay, well, you'll graduate. But then he just wanted us to go work in the field, or no, go work in you have an education, go find a work in town.
Well, because because a high school graduation was actually probably far more, like, culturally speaking, that like was beyond what he was familiar with growing up.
That was their level of success.
Yeah, getting a high school diploma.
Yeah, first generation.
Yep.
So as I was going to high school, I was in Notice for a little bit, and Notice is a small school. So the same 23 kids that I started out in Notice were the same kids that I went all through school. So we were tight. And then Dad decides to build a home in Caldwell and through the Idaho Migrant Council program. And so sweat equity. And so we moved to Caldwell in my 10th year, starting my 10th year. And I said, Caldwell, that's a metropolitan. That's not Notice. And so I was really, really scared. But I fit in. I was, by that time, everyone's got their clique.
Right.
And so you're just kind of trying to fit in where you can. And we knew some of the folks that lived at the labor camp when we were little, but we hadn't, I'd gone to school in Notice and they continued in Caldwell. So we weren't really good friends. But I just thought, okay, well, one thing I got going for me is I'm a good student. So I'll just be quiet and I won't say anything and I'll get good grades. And so I did. I got really, really good grades. And, and so I remember one time my world history class, Mr. I think it was Mr. Scott. He was my world history class. And I was a 10th grader. So I was a sophomore. And he said, I want to speak to you, Marisela, and this other kid in class in the hallway. And I thought, oh no, what have I done? What have I done? I mean, I think I've done everything right. What have I done? Because I was that person so detailed. So he went in the hallway and he says, just want you to know how proud I am that you are, an honor student because you made, the 4.0 or, whatever system it was. And I was like, oh, really? Because my parents, they were like, the kids are home. Okay. Summer starts, go to work in the fields. And, as long as you're not in trouble, we're good. They didn't do parent-teacher conference. My mom was a very shy lady. My dad was busy with other things. And that was just stuff that they didn't go to. And as long as we were doing okay, they weren't worried about it. And so I was like, oh my gosh. And I remember the first time I had straight A's was in 6th grade in Notice. And I waved my paper and my dad's like, oh, go get the hoe, change into your work clothes. We're going to go to work. And I thought, oh, this isn't a big thing. So when I got to high school and Mr. Scott told me that, I was like, wow. And so when I was in high school in Caldwell is when I would listen to the kids. I was really quiet. I'd listen to the kids and they talk about Caldwell Fine Arts. And hey, are you going to go to Fine Arts? It's tonight. And I thought, I wonder what that is. That must be a thing that white people do. And I thought, I wonder what that is. And so, I was, because we had kids that were kids from doctors and lawyers and attorneys and judges and, people that had professions and business owners. And I was just went along. But, I thought, when I can't compete in those things, I can't really compete in sports because I'm not athletic, but I can compete in grades. So, when I graduated, I was top 10.
Wow.
Out of 200 and I think it was like 283, almost 300 kids. And so I was like, okay, wow, that's kind of cool. And I remember I had some people, some previous educators, Jesus and Yolanda de Leon, who came up to me at graduation. I had never met them, but they said, we are so proud of you. And I was like, oh, thank you. So 5 years later, I apply at Micron. And they asked me to bring my transcripts. And they said, so how do you feel? They looked at my transcript and they said, the transcript is full of numbers and everything and your ACT scores or SAT scores and everything. And then way at the bottom, it says your ranking in class. And I was number 1. And they said, how does it feel to be valedictorian? And I said, oh, I was valedictorian? I was never told.
Oh.
And so later on in life, I went back and I asked some administrators and I said, why was I not told? And they said, well, the reason was because you, the programs that we had for you, and then I looked at all the other Latino girls, the Mexican girls, or, and so the plan was that to get us out of the fields and put us in professional offices, working in banks or insurance companies. And that was going to be our path. And so what they told me is that you had the easier classes like accounting and shorthand. And the other kids that were in top 10 had chemistry and calculus. So we couldn't really give you because you had an easier load. I said, but in my history class, in my government class, I super exceeded them. So in the classes that I was with them, I had the top scores in everything. Mm-hmm. But because I had the easier workload in electives, or that's why they never told me.
Oh my.
And so, so it was hard to live with this is a path we have for you.
Someone else deciding that for you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I understand how they figured, okay, the parents probably aren't going to want them. And my parents, I asked my parents, I wanted to go to college, and I was able to go the one semester to BSU. And I did receive a scholarship and, of course, my FAFSA, but there were no programs like Trio Upward Bound that teach you and acclimate you to college life, that also reach out to your parents and tell them this is what they could be. So, and my dad was ready for me to go to school, to go to work. Mm-hmm. So I forced all my classes into a morning day, and I worked from noon until 5 at a bank. And then, and so that I could keep my father happy. But, it was too much. Mm-hmm. And I thought, I can't do it. And, college is so different from high school. And so, I thought, well, and so that was where my college career ended. So when I became a trustee, I thought, I don't have a degree. Mm-hmm. And so one of the ladies that writes an editorial, Judy Farrow, she was, had helped me with my campaign when I won. And I said, Judy, I just feel like, the imposter syndrome kept creeping up. Mm-hmm. And she said, just so you know, Cecil D. Andrus did not have a degree as well. And he was the governor. I said, oh, so I could be governor? And she says, yes, you could. So, it's just those things that people will, it's like some people will tell you, remember, your place is down here. Mm-hmm. And then and other people will say, but look at what you can be. And that's the people that we need mm-hmm. to actually help us grow and to give us faith in ourselves and to give us, the strength that we need when we are in a room where nobody looks like you and you're advocating and you're thinking, oh my gosh, I don't have the 25-cent words that they use. I have 5-cent words. Mm-hmm. And my words only are 2 or 3 syllables, and they're using these words that are 5 and 6 syllables, and I don't even know what they mean.
Well, and what you're describing is so, it really resonates with me because I think that a lot of people get into scenarios where they don't really feel like they belong there because of maybe of the background that they lack. I know that when I started, I'm a PhD student at Boise State. And so I got my master's from the University of Idaho while I was on the school board in Lewiston. It was an online program. And what was nice was different from the 80s, compared to the 20s today, are that now we have more programs that are suited to meet people's needs right where they are. Right. Mm-hmm. And so for example, this online program from University of Idaho, where I could stay in Lewiston with my family, with my kids, and I could, further my education in that way. But it was interesting because when I even thought about going to a PhD program, I'm like, gosh, I'm much older right? I've been in the home. I mean, even when I joined the school board in Lewiston, I remember thinking like, okay, well, I started out as a teacher, but I haven't taught for a really long time. I have been in the home with my kids for a really long time. And as a mother who stayed in the home with her kids, there's a lot of beautiful things to that, right? I mean, you talk about like, gosh, there's a lot of beautiful things that my father taught me about working really hard and, like making sure that I'm able to, support myself. All of those things are good, right? It's not like they're bad things, but then not having this belief, someone helping us foster that belief in ourselves that, hey, I can go out and do this thing. I can do this. I do belong here. I do have a good reason to be here. I mean, I remember this last fall, I had a professor who it was like my responsibility to figure out like, well, what kind of grants are out there for students? Like, what could I be a part of, like a research project? And I walked into his office and I told him I have this podcast. I was like, oh, I have this podcast because I care about education in Idaho. Just education in general around the nation. I care about kids and I really want to talk about these things that are impacting our communities. And he was like, I have a rural community collaborative that I want you to be a part of. And I was like, whoa, like that, like just that, like it was like an acknowledgement, right? Like you're talking about where your teacher says, you have straight A's. And you're like, oh, right? Like this acknowledgement and like, oh, someone else is seeing this thing in me.
Right.
I need to see this thing in me. And now, and the other thing that you talk about is that it's so important for us to make sure, like as we're in our education today with kids and helping them understand these programs and resources that are available, we also have to educate parents on what resources are available and meeting them right where they are, giving them the information that they need so that they can make informed choices for their kids. Because like I'm working on a program right now in a partnership with Idaho PTA and the Idaho Adoption Coalition and Boise State. There is a scholarship for kids who are kids who have been in foster care. And so we've been working on this for a couple of years. I mean, the program's been around for a while, but we have this big celebration in November because it's National Adoption Month in November. And one of the things that I noticed about the material was that none of it was geared towards foster parents. And it was just geared towards, like maybe like the school counselor informing the kid. But I was like, this needs to get all the way to the parent because our teenagers, they need that extra support, that push at home too. And so I feel like you've been hitting on so many important points that really inform who you are and your choices that really then help me like understand truly why you're on the school board today and how all of your experiences, like you don't need that thing after your name, right? It's like all of your experiences inform who you are and the knowledge and wisdom that you have to be on your community school board.
Right. And that's value.
Yes.
And so one thing I need to let you know too, because I was always involved with my kids.
Yeah.
And I remember as a little girl being a notice, and it was the end of the school year. We're going on a field trip. And I would think, oh, I hope I get picked. I hope I don't have to end up being with the teacher because nobody picks me, because my mom never went. So when I grew up and I had my two children, I was a single mom, and I thought, I don't care. I'm working at Micron, and those are going to be my vacation days. The days of field trip are going to be my vacation days. So I was always involved with, my kids. I always wanted to make sure that they were okay because I didn't have that with my kids. And I thought, I'm going to push them and I want them to go to college and I want to do all these things. So I did a lot with my kids. I got involved in, I don't know if it was PTA or PTO in the Caldwell School District, but I remember one of the ladies said, you should be part of the program and come after school in the meetings. And we do all sorts of things. We fundraise, for Bark for the playground, things that the school can't do. And I said, okay. So then and just to back it up, my dad was, old school. Like I said, you work, you turn in your check. This is what you're going to do. You're going to live at home until you get married. And I will be the boss of you until you get married. A woman without a man is nothing. So you will, I will be your boss and then you'll get married. And so that was my mentality for a long time, that I needed to be married. And so I chose a couple partners that didn't work out. And I said, no, I think I'm doing okay on my own. So when I was with, focusing on my kids, and I have a very good friend, Selena Medellin, and I met her because her kids started going to the elementary with my kids. And she says, okay, they're picking officers for next year. Let's be co-presidents. And I told her, Selena, no, we can't be presidents because the white people are the ones that are the presidents. We could be secretaries or treasurers. And she looked at me and she said, are you crazy? She goes, why can't we? We're going to be, I'm going to put our names in. And I was like, oh my gosh. And it's that, where the trauma that you've gone through, that isn't your place. But then somebody comes and says, no, we are going to be. And I'll be forever grateful with her because now, I'm the Madam Chair for the school board when I didn't even think I was good enough to be a co-president for PTO at an elementary.
Yeah.
And so it is, and sometimes I talk to the parents and I tell them, those are the voices that your kids hear when they're in an interview, when they're wondering, can I do this? So the things that you tell them are important because those are the little whispers that are backing them up. And when I have my school board meetings and we're acknowledging a child that lived at the labor camp with a single mom, and she has been accepted at Columbia University in the state of New York. And, and I speak Spanish to her and I tell her, I know you because I worked in the place where you lived and I've seen your struggles and I know you don't speak English. So I'm talking to you in Spanish. And I want you to know that we appreciate the support that you give to your child, even though you can't help them with the homework, but you push them along and push them along. And she says, my daughter has beautiful wings and I couldn't afford to buy her the wings, but I can blow so she can fly. And I'm just like, okay, let's pause for a moment. I need to cry. Yeah. But just things like that. And it's important that our parents know that we understand that they can't help them with homework because they don't, excuse me, they don't speak the English and they don't read the English, but they're just like, we know you can do it. There's a saying in Spanish that says, give it your 100%, al 100, dale al puro 100, give it your 100%. And sometimes that's enough for a kid to say, okay, I can do it. I can figure out, I'll talk to my teacher, I'll do this, I'll do that. So, and we just need more parents to be aware. We need to reach more parents because a lot of parents, they don't feel like they belong. So what do we do to bring them to the schools? What do we do to connect with them? Sometimes when we knock on their door, they won't open the door. They don't know who we are. So I tell my administrators, meet them where they're at. Go to the quinceañeras, go to the weddings, go to wherever you're invited. Because for a moment, you will be the one white person in a Mexican community, but you'll know how it feels. And they will see, oh, look, the superintendent's here or their teacher's here. Oh my gosh, they care. And then that's where the connection happens. So, and now in Caldwell, we're able to bring in a mariachi program for the first time in the state of Idaho, as far as the public school system as an elective. And we're doing fundraisers so that we can, get the kids their instruments and doing fundraisers for their outfits and things like that. But, and the parents are so excited.
Yeah, I saw them perform somewhere. I don't know where I saw them perform, but I saw and I don't know if that it was like from the Caldwell School District, but I know that I saw some sort of performance with like like beautiful costumes and dancing, and I was like, that's the coolest. Like I loved watching that. And I want to just like go back and say like, hell yes to your friend who said to you, yes, we effing can be co-presidents together. Because sometimes it takes that friend who is standing next to us, puts their arm around, arm in arm and says, we're going to do this together.
Yeah.
And there's no reason why we can't be in that position. And I'm so glad that you had that friend help you understand that.
She is my forever friend. She's the one that has, her husband is the one that brings me flowers on special occasions. And, I'm like, oh, he's the first man that's ever bought me flowers. It's not related to me. So, you need those friends, because if they would have said you alone be president, I would not have done it, Alexis. But when she said, we'll do it together as co-presidents, I said, okay, if you're going to be with me, we can do it.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So you are the chairwoman of the Caldwell School District School Board, which I love. I mean, all of these things about you so inform, just make this conversation so much more meaningful for me, Marisela. I just love it. I'm just loving it. So, but you've kind of spoken a little bit about some of the challenges that this Caldwell School District faces. And prior to this conversation, I went up and looked on Idaho Ed News, I was just looking up some data, right? Because I just comparison data and understanding, what the Caldwell School District look like. And I love Idaho Ed News. Just for people listening, they have this great website. You just go to Google, type in Idaho Ed News, and then one of their main choices just along the top there is data. And you can compare schools just even within a district. And, at one point I was just comparing elementary schools within my kids' school district. So I was like, well, what are some of the differences? They talk about free and reduced lunch. They talk about demographics. They talk test scores. They talk, local funding, all of those different things. So I was just looking up some of those things about Caldwell because I was like, I'm not familiar with Caldwell, in the way that I'm familiar with West Ada or Lewiston or some of the other districts around the state. And, in doing that, then I was looking up some of the challenges and, that Caldwell specifically faces. So one of the things that I liked that you said, kind of just to start, was what makes Caldwell special, or what are some of the things that you're doing that are awesome and beneficial for the Caldwell School District? I mean, you mentioned the mariachi program. Tell me what that is.
So it, like you were talking about, you've seen some of the kids. Mariachi is one of our music that every generation, the grandparents, the parents, the kids have grown up with. It is a type of music that it's like an honorable music per se, that you use it for, to celebrate, whether it's birth, weddings, quinceañeras. Whenever somebody says, we're going to get a mariachi, it's like, oh, whoa, they really love you. Yeah. Your family really loves you because you're going to get a mariachi. And it's music that has, been used at funerals. Like I said, my grandfather had a mariachi when my father was born at the hospital. And, and so it's just music. It's the connection that we make within all the generations of, like I said, little kids, parents and grandparents. And we're close like that because a lot of our families are multi-generational that live in a home. And that's why we had such a hard time with COVID, because of that. But, and a kid will always seek approval from their parents or their grandparents. And so when your grandma has her favorite song is such and such, and it's a mariachi song, and then your parents say, well, I want, we don't want this tradition to die. So outside of education and school, there have been some folks that have been leaders in making sure that this music is alive, and we don't just see it on TV or listen to it on the radio, that is actually alive. And one of the people that have helped out a lot in this area in the Treasure Valley is Rudy Rodriguez and Mr. Prado, Lucio Prado, because I remember when my parents had their anniversary, we asked them to come and play. Well, I didn't know that mariachi is very much instrumental. So when they brought their mariachi to play, half or more than half of the folks that were on there were from the Boise Philharmonic. And I thought, oh, wow, because they said, yeah, I mean, this is professional music. And so I thought, this is a big deal, because there was Asian people, white people that were in the mariachi, and they were amazing. And because they're professionals, right? And they love this music. And so they've kept it alive, and so we can listen to it live. And then other folks have said, well, we want our kids to start playing mariachi. So there's been the young mariachi programs. And so when, I think about the connection, here's the thing, if during our orchestra section at the end of the year, the program, the teacher throws in a mariachi song, our ears will perk up and go, oh, and it, the memories that music brings to you, and you just think about those things, and I think, wow. So as a school board trustee, I've been able to go to different conferences. We went to one in San Antonio, the migrant conference that I go to. And one of them was in San Antonio, and there was a mariachi program that was being taught in San Antonio. And I said, how do they do it? And I told my superintendent, this is what we need. And she just nodded her head like, true, And I said, well, we're going to make it happen. So I run after them after they get off the stage, and I'm running after them down the halls. And I'm talking to their director, and I said, how did you do it? And he said, it's this orchestra with the guitars and trumpets. And so he said, call me. Here's my contact number. If you guys want to start something like that, I can tell you how to do it. And so we did, we worked on it for a couple years, and then it was like, okay, we can do it. And I told Dr. French is our superintendent. I said, and here's the thing, Dr. French, there's children who come to school who are not acknowledged for their athletic abilities. They're not acknowledged because of their intelligence. They're not student council, but they have a signature song that they sing with their mariachi in public at weddings and baptisms and quinceañeras. And that's even better than a speech that they do on their own, because they're putting out their vocal cords and to be scrutinized, and they do a heck of a job. And I said, and these kids, when we start this program, they will be the leaders of, for the other kids. Like, hey, it's not like we're starting from the ground up. We already have kids that do it. And the parents are so excited. And so when there was a news cast on speaking to the kids, and one of the things that they said is that they said, we look at our grandma and we see that she's crying because she's so happy because we're singing this song or playing her song. And sometimes we don't speak the Spanish very much, and but this is the connection that we have with her. And all you want as a kid is approval. It's like, we just want our parents, our grandparents to be proud of us. And so that does it, in the sense of, whatever generational trauma they could go through, or whatever, whatever they need to go through to prove that they're worthy as a child. Because sometimes, it's like you're looking for what is their need, what need is not being met. And so you go through those paths and you get those needs met, which could be approval or whatever it is. And I said, so if we incorporate it in the school system, and then, we can get more parents to come to these programs, and then we could talk to them about launch, and we could talk to them about True Upward Bound, and then talk to them about, your kid could be a music major in college, and they could be a music teacher in college, or, when they become their profession. And wouldn't that be great, teaching others? And so it opens up their eyes into, well, my daughter doesn't have to be a banker, or, if that's not what they want, or we know that she should go in nursing, because, you don't want your kids to be an emotional train wreck to do what you want them to do, but to be able to create or be what their passion is. And so that's a lot of the things that, as a parent, sometimes we don't know where to stop, where to let them dream and pursue their dreams.
Oh, I totally agree. You're speaking my language. Yeah, totally. So when did that program start? When did the mariachi program start?
We have one program starting in our middle school, and that's the orchestra program that just started. We have a teacher that was just like ready to just go through the gate. But we are implementing all that for the fall 2024.
Okay,
for the middle school and for high school. So they will be electives.
Okay, so that's starting this fall.
Mm-hmm.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
And that's like true innovation because you saw it somewhere else and you brought it. And it'll be interesting to see because there are other school districts around the state that have large Hispanic populations. And so you guys are real trendsetters then in that program. It'll be interesting to see if other districts pick that up. You know, as an elective.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. I love that. And offering programs and then meeting people right where they are, as you said, and then it gets them into the door and then you can talk about other things with them. You can talk about other things. So one thing that's going on in your community that's real hot news right now is that the levy failed, the supplemental levy failed for Caldwell School District. And just as like an FYI, because there's lots of different terms, it was interesting. I had a class just this last semester. And as I was talking about like school board, just effectiveness with their communities. And one of those measures was bonds. And, you know, some of the people in the class have been with me all year long, so I know exactly what I'm talking about. But there was this young girl at the end of my presentation and she was like, you know, she raised her hand and I was like, oh yeah, what's your question? And she looked at me and she's like, well, what's a bond? And I was like, oh yeah, I guess I just made the assumption that, you know, all in the room know what I'm talking about. So the supplemental levy is the renewable voter approved levy, like generating money, funds for a school to be used for operating costs. And those operating costs include, I like wrote these down just because there were so many, salaries and benefits of staff, day-to-day operations, special ed program, instructional technology, transportation, extracurricular programs, safety measures, SROs. That supplemental levy covers a lot of things. And right now, Idaho Ed News told me, and this could be a little bit different, but right now I think you have like $4 million just in terms of levy that are probably going to end soon.
Right, 4.1 million. Yes.
So it was interesting because I read in an article that said that, I can't actually remember which person was quoted. I think it was Idaho Ed News. And they said, we're surprised that this levy failed because for 50 years, the Caldwell School District has had a levy and you only need 50% plus one. And your district got 48%. And the article noted that it failed by around 100 votes. So I was curious. And they said, like, we were surprised. So were you surprised by the fail? And just kind of like talk about that a little bit first.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. We were surprised. And it just seems like, you know, like I was telling you before, when it seems like every year we're campaigning for something. You know, we just keep campaigning. But one of the reasons that And we're gonna, you know, hand it back to the legislators. They have taken away election dates. We used to be able to have election dates for schools in March, May, August, and November. And so they took away August and they took away March. And that was crucial because our supplemental levies were run every 2 years. And they're just renewals. Sometimes we can ask for more because, you know, we were just thinking a few years ago before COVID that we were going to get a lot of charters that were opening up. And so, you know, we could lose some students, which would affect our average daily attendance and things like that. So we thought, okay, so that we don't have to, but you know, you still need a teacher to teach fifth grade, whether she has 5 kids or, you know, 30 kids or 20 kids or, you know, 24 kids versus 35 kids. So you're still going to need a teacher there. So if we lose kids, you know, it's like we can't just reduce the teachers, that we have to have the teachers. Just like we're not going to reduce, we're just going to turn the lights on half the school. You know, we got to put, you know, so that was our thought back then. And then, but like I said, then they took away our March election. And we ran the supplemental levy. All the ones that passed were ran in March. And it was important for us because we have to set the budget. We have to turn in the budget to the state by July. And June, the board has to accept the budget in June to be able to turn it in by the due date, the 1st of July. So by then, you know, it was already set. We'd run it. We'd put the paperwork in, you know, the verbiage that needs to go to the elections office and all that. Well, when they took away March, we were like, oh my gosh, it's going to have to pass in May. And then, of course, it's a election year, primary. And, you know, in a lot of our folks said the people that vote in March are not the same people that vote in May.
Mm.
And so, and then again, legislators passed a law that said when you pass a supplemental levy or when you put it out there, you're going to have to add all the information that needs to be on the supplemental levy. And all the information is like what it's used for, you know, and not exactly, you know, but roughly what it's used for. And then the tax impact of, you know, how much the tax of $41.11 per 100,000 of a taxable assessed value per year based on current conditions, proposed levy, you know, all this verbiage. So before we used to be able to put it on our reader boards at the school. Don't forget supplemental levy, but we can't anymore because we have to add all this information. It doesn't fit on the board. So, you know, hands are tied. I know that Idaho Falls pushed for a bond because they'd had a fire, and because they did it incorrectly,
It was voided out.
It was voided. Mm-hmm. So, you know, we're walking on eggshells because we don't want, you know, and so who can go out and who can advocate for it, because they tell the schools you can educate, but you can't advocate. You can't tell people vote yes on the levy. And it's got to be off school grounds. And, you know,
there's a lot of rules that I think that's really, you bring up a really good point, that there are a lot of rules for like fair reasons in some measure, right? Because it's a government agency going out and saying, hey, we need this. But what's interesting to me, though, is that, and this is something I've really thought about, like for school boards, you know, school board members are tied by open meeting laws, meaning that when you get together, 3 or more, that you're now in a meeting, right? A quorum. And so, and you're not allowed to talk about what happens in executive session. And when you go out and you speak to the community, you're speaking on behalf of yourself. You're not speaking on behalf of the board. Correct. But what's interesting, though, and this was something that I experienced as a school board member, was that there is some fear there was like some fear put into school board members, like, gosh, I have to be so careful when I speak to my community. Maybe I just like shouldn't even say anything unless I'm at a school board. But the reality is that school board members need to be out in their communities, right? They're the ones, like the way I view it is that like the school board is the one putting out that information. Like they're the ones saying, we need this. The government agency over here, they can share the type of information that we're going to, you know, the language, what it's going to be used for, all of those things. But as a school board member, I'm going to go out and tell my community, we need to pass this. And so I think that like right now, like what I observe is that there's not, like, school board members have to do a lot of things. You're a volunteer. You volunteer a lot of your time. It's a lot of information to take in. I mean, even as a person who worked in a school district for a short amount of time, it's very different to be a teacher and to be a school board member. Like being a teacher, I have some background in education. Like I understand how things work, but that's really different than being on a school board, like full stop there.
Yeah.
It's really different. And so one of the things that I'm observing is that there's just not a very good avenue right now or mechanism, or school board members haven't really kind of gotten into this area of how to engage their community members, maybe like on a bigger scale, unless they're having town halls, right? Where they're just informing their community of those things. Right. But again, it's one more thing. Like I was talking to a school board member and she's like, I spend 30 hours a week as a school board member. That's nearly a full-time job that she spends as a school board member. So do you feel like, as a school board member, do you feel like you've seen your board foster that connection with the community, or that's something that you want to grow and develop as a school board member?
We have one of the school board member that's been on the board longer than me is an educator is a teacher at Valley View School District. So, and I love that because, we get the point of view from a teacher's perspective. And so, he always is, okay, let's look at this, let's look at that. And he's my vice chair. And so I appreciate all the information that gives me. And, he was the one that said, we've got to, start phone banking, and we've got to, let people know that they need to come out and vote on this. And so we did, but, sometimes it's, I don't know, is community tired? I don't know but or did we get to feeling too safe that it was gonna be okay? We've always passed it. But then everybody woke up May 22nd and thought, what in the world happened when we lost all, our moderate Republicans that lost their primaries? And we were like, what in the world? It was like totally different because, all the dark money that's coming into the state that really pushed a lot of the voters to, to choose the way they did. And so I know that we have got to November is when we're going to run it again. And I'll tell you what, we're going to have a plan. Mm-hmm. And I know that I was in a presentation I attended a presentation. This is one of the things that I truly completely love about ISBA, the Idaho School Board Association. Yeah. Idaho School Board Association. Like I was telling you, when I became a school board member, a trustee, I thought I want to be the best trustee I can. And the best way to do it is to learn and to train. And if there's training, go to it. And when I first started, my chair would say, "Oh, I've been a trustee for 8 years, and I already know everything there is to know." And I thought, well, I don't. I'm going to get to where you're at. And then I thought, did you know there's new things coming up, and you don't know these new things? And so as a chair, I've always told my board, you need to be going to these trainings, and this is a prerequisite, and you need to go, and you're only going to get better, and you're only going to understand. So you need to go to these. And so we are one of the school boards that, usually all our members are at every training and at all the conventions and everything. And so I thought, that's the only way we can learn. And so this last convention we had Tony Brenniger, who is the chair for the Valley View School District, did a presentation on how they couldn't pass their bond levy, and they finally were able to get it passed. And how did they do it after 3 times? Mm-hmm. And so they had to plan and make sure that they were doing everything correctly, not using the school resources. But it was a big endeavor, but it took 2 times to lose to finally figure it out. Mm-hmm. So, so we need to we don't have 2 times to lose. We've got to figure it out, and we've got to make sure that it passes. And I think a lot of times with a supplemental levy, a bond is, to build a school. A supplemental levy is just to keep operations going. And we've gotten a lot of information from the community that they're upset, and they're, like, what is going on? And, and we're like, well, you have spoken. You've told us, that you don't want this levy. And, and it's hard because we have to make decisions and choices, and parents, and is it a wake-up call? I think it is for all parties, for the board, for the school district, and for the patrons, mm-hmm. of how is this going to affect us? And and we have committees, and I'm sure you understand, our facilities committees, how bad are our buildings? Our buildings are bad. And, what are we going to have to do? And we think, okay, down the line, we're going to have to do this and this and this. And well, the fact that the supplemental levy failed has pushed those. It's no longer down the line. It's now. And so we've got to make some changes. We've got to do things and then, but there's so much behind it. And we discuss it at our board meetings. We're very transparent. Our board meetings are recorded. You can look at things and so, but there's always the keyboard warriors that are out there, and you just think, oh, honey, I just want to say, come join us at the board meeting. You'll learn lots.
Yeah, it's interesting because, we've been hearing just even in West Data, like lots of information, people really frustrated about this, that, or whatever. And one of the things that we're noticing is that there's been an influx of community members. And the Caldwell School, the Caldwell community is growing as well, right? Like everyone's growing here in the Treasure Valley.
Yes.
And a lot of those people are not moving from a different part of the state of Idaho. They're coming from outside of the state of Idaho, which is like, great. You want to come here, you want to contribute to our communities. Fantastic. We'd love to have you. Okay.
Right.
Like, we're not saying don't come, even though I know some people are saying don't come. Okay?
Right.
I mean, I know some people are saying it.
Yeah.
But what's interesting is that, they're bringing, their money with them. They're bringing their knowledge and their experiences, but a lot of them are bringing the bad taste in their mouths that they have from the school districts and their old communities. All the states are, that surround Idaho, they're bringing those thoughts and feelings in, and they're saying, this is what's happening in the schools, and this is what's happening in the schools. And it's like, no, that's not happening here in Idaho.
Right.
No, actually, we've taken care of that. Oh, we have a law for that. Oh, our school board has already made a policy for this thing. And so a lot of these things that I feel like are being flung at our school boards and our schools are things that actually are not happening in the state of Idaho. And I feel like that's a really important point that not enough new people coming into the state understand.
Right. I absolutely agree with you. There is a lot out there that, they just don't understand. And like I said, come to the school board meetings and, talk to us. People call me on the phone. I'll talk to them and I'll explain things to them. I'll let them follow the proper channels, that we're supposed to let them, talk to your building administrator, and then it goes up the line and, we are transparent. We want to help you. We want, get involved, be on parent committees, come to, whatever you do, just, be involved with your children because they're your greatest asset. They're our greatest asset. And, we want them we really, really want them to succeed. You talked about data. Yeah. There's a lot of data that's out there. We read it. It gets measured the way, different tools, different measuring tools. Some of the data that people need to understand about Caldwell is that we, are the percentage of our kindergarten ready kids. Kindergarten ready kids in Caldwell is very low. But then again, the state refused federal funds for pre-K education. Okay. So I was on a plane with some colleagues, and one of the ladies on the plane was talking about, she lives in Boise, and she was talking about how, she's pregnant and she's so excited because when we got back to Boise, her and her husband were going to go look for, going to go interview some daycare centers for when their baby was born. And, it's like, oh, you're being so proactive. That's just great. And I sit back and I think, the people in my community, when they get pregnant, they're like, oh my gosh, I hope my mom can take another kid and babysit. And that's reality. That is reality. So a lot of the kids from Caldwell, their kindergarten ready level is really low. And so, and you get to Ada County and it's a lot higher. So then they start, it's just like a race. They start higher and they grow. But, if you look at how much our kids have grown from kindergarten to when they graduate, it's a lot more. We may be still down at the bottom, but it's a lot more than the other kids have grown because of where they started. And so that's what we see. And that's what, and I don't think there may not be a measuring tool for that. But, we have excellent kids. We got great kids that have come from, just horrible situations. We have all an alternative school. I know that there's many alternative schools all around, the Treasure Valley. And you look at those kids and I talk to the teachers. I listen to the stories of what the valedictorian has gone through, homelessness or whatever it is. And I think, oh my gosh, this celebration has to be even bigger for you because of everything you've gone through. But we're not going to let anybody know that, right? Because they just want to cross the line. That's all they want, and to go to college possibly. So, we struggle with one of the options when we lost the levy. Do we go to 4-day schools? We can't go to 4-day schools. There's kids that have to be in school at least 5 days a week to feel safe physically, emotionally, and mentally. So they have to be in school. Mm-hmm. And that's taken the education part out. So, there are some situations, and I know that there's some situations all over the Treasure Valley about that, but there's a lot in Caldwell. So, and so we have to think about those things, and that's not an option. And it would be great to have a 4-day week, but Nampa, I just hope that those kids are going to be okay, because sometimes, they could be going home to situations. We have kids that take their backpack of food home so that they'll be able to eat on the weekends. And that's reality, because we don't all live in a beautiful home with a white picket fence in an HOA. We don't. And people need to realize it, that they're living with grandma because mom and dad are absent and grandma's sick, and they're praying that grandma doesn't die. I have 4 foster kids that I live with. So, I talk about, and just so you know, I'm also a candidate for the legislature.
Oh, so, I did not know that, Marisela. Yes. I didn't know that. Okay. Whoa, tell me about that. Like what?
So this is my 2nd year running.
Okay.
And so it would be for the House of Representatives in District 11 in Caldwell. And I ran the first year, and, people, when it was a 35, I think about 35, 65. And then I think, well, that's a big jump. But I thought, no, I only needed 15% to win.
Yeah.
So it's, those are the things that I think of. But I do run as a Dem, and we do live in a red state. And, we have a lot of Republicans. And so, unfortunately, people pick the letter and not the person.
Which I'm going to say that's something that I really like about school boards. And I really hope that legislators never touch, because I know they've talked about it. And it's something that I really feel strongly about, that it needs to stay nonpartisan.
Right.
That it was interesting when I was on my school board. I'm a Republican, and I was sitting next to a Democrat, and he and I became really good friends. And again, you don't know because it's not on the ballot, right? Which I'm really glad about. But actually the Democratic Party called him when my first term was up, and they said, hey, should we get someone to run? Because I was not registered as a Democrat. And he was like, no, stand down. She's awesome. We want her here, and we had a nice mix of people. And that's what's nice about a school board, is that because there's no letter next to your name,
right,
you get to know, you can get to know the person and the people who were on there. So, and that's you're right. That's what's hard about our legislators, who are running for those positions, that a lot of times people don't take time to get to know the person. And Democrats in the state, they do have a major uphill battle in a majority of the state.
Yeah. And for me, like I had told you earlier, I just like-minded people. I don't, Julia Yamamoto, I am heartbroken and just sick that she lost her primary. Who was a champion of education.
Big champion. She was the chair of the House Education Committee.
Correct. And, and so I just, it's just a blow, like a huge blow. And, and those are the people I want to work with, people that understand, that have been there. They've been teachers that, and like I said, I don't care what the letter is behind your name, as long as you have a backbone and you're representing your community and not a party, essentially, but your community, and I'm willing to work with who will be at the table. And here, let me share my story. I want to hear your story. Why do you believe this way? And you listen to me, and then let's come to an agreement, because that's the type of person I am, being diplomatic, working with all people, because I've never been in a group of a majority, my whole life. So, so let's just work together. And so, when I threw my hat in to be a candidate and I, threw my hat in again. And so I just want to be able to, when I first got on the board, I said, well, I want teachers to get paid better money.
Yeah.
And that was my whole, when I become a trustee, that's going to be my main focus.
Yeah.
And then I said, okay, well, we need to pay teachers better money. So, negotiations, how are we going to do this? And they said, well, this is all we got. And I said, well, where can we get more money? Can we cook tamales, or what can we do?
Yeah.
That's a lot of tamales. And I said, well, and they say how do we get more money? Well, it's all funded. There's a funding formula in the state. And I said, okay, well, when we go to the Capitol on the Hill, we'll talk. And we'll just say, hey, we need more money. Well, it doesn't work that way. And then, you're like, okay, well, how do we fix this? Mm-hmm. We got to go to the phone company and talk to the lady about the charge, right? Mm-hmm. And so I'm just like, okay, well then, and then I had some people, it's people when they approach you and they say, we think that you could win. We think that you have, that you have good in your heart for your community. And a lot of people know you, so would you like to? And then, of course, that whole imposter syndrome, kind of like, me, why me, why me, why me? Mm-hmm. And then I think, why not me? Okay, let's do it. Mm-hmm. And then I know that it's going to take time because of the community we live in, and sometimes we're going to have to see hard things happen, like failed supplemental levies or whatever it may be, and then hopefully, but a lot of it is reaching out to your community, talking to your community, like you said, town halls, speaking to them, door knocking, and saying, listen, and they asked me, why don't you put your donkey on your pamphlets? I said, because you wouldn't talk to me. You won't talk to me. But if you just come and talk to me to ask me, then what does it matter if I'm a donkey or an elephant, an R or a D? You need to vote for the person who has your interests in mind. And so that's how I want to work. I don't know how you want to work, but that's how I want to work.
Well, and I think that that's so valuable in being a school board member because it's so important for us. Well, I say us, sorry, I'm not a school board member, but it's so important. I really do feel like one of the bunch sometimes, only just because I've been a school board member. Mm-hmm. But and I really value what school board members do. And I really for me, sometimes I do feel like it's a team sport, right? The board has to work together as a team, but then the board members need to work with their community. And I'm a big believer that unless we are intentionally building those relationships with our community, it's not happening. And intentionality is a really important part of the process in that when we're not intentional about building the relationship, something else is going to come in to ruin it, right? Those like the dark money, the outside voices, all of those things are going to come in together to kind of spoil the pot. And it's really important, I feel like here in our school communities in Idaho, it's really important for us to build the relationships to help people understand where we are and what we want to, what our vision is. And one of the things that I found, by the time this episode airs, you guys as a board will already have met to determine how you're going to, move forward. This last Monday, you had a special meeting. And one of the things that I read in the article was really interesting. So, you guys have 6 elementary schools and you're going to be closing one and moving kids around. You're going to take your 2 middle schools and make one a 5-6 and another a 7-8. Mm-hmm. And you have 39 employees and you're keeping everyone. Is that right? Or that's the proposed plan right now, to keep everyone?
I believe so, yeah.
I think so, yeah. Mm-hmm. So to keep everyone, which I think is like phenomenal, like you're just like, our hey, teachers. We really need our teachers, our SROs. But one of the things that I read in the article that really struck me was someone said, basically, these are my own words, we just have to make the best out of the situation that we're in right now. This is the situation we find ourselves in. We have to make decisions. And And part of that is getting creative with what you have and the buildings that you have and the funding you have. How do you feel about all of those different things as you go forward and make the decision?
Well, it's, we have like I was telling you, we have committees that are doing our maintenance, and, the governor is going around giving, these checks for facility improvements, and the proposed $20 million that, we're supposed to be getting in for our school district, $20 million in 10 years, when right now we need $50 million just to take care of the extreme repairs that we have at Caldwell. So it's not even enough. So, and those words, those numbers go in my head. But when our committee comes back and reports and says, only half of Lincoln School has heat. Our Canyon Springs Alternative School, the high school, if we get another boiler repair, we're going to have to close it. And we don't know if we can go through another winter. And, and it costs just to put a Band-Aid for that boilerplate, $3 million. The assessed, roughly, value of the school is probably $6 million. So we're not going to put a Band-Aid that costs $3 million. And, and so these numbers are like, whoa, and what are we going to do? Because there was a time that we had to shut the school down for 3 to 4 days because we had no heat in the wintertime. And those are the stories that we hear from up north. Some of those dilapidated schools that are just falling apart, and, water coming through the ceilings and things like that. And so, it makes us see the big picture of, okay, what are we doing? Where can we, and we are cutting staff, a lot of it in the athletics department, in supplies. We're trying to cut it where we can, field trips, just transportation. And another thing, people, I don't know if they know that only 65% of our transportation is refundable from the state. And the supplemental levy pays for the other 35%. Mm-hmm. So we're going to have to cut transportation somewhere, somehow. And a lot of it is redistricting, because, we used to bus kids and pass right through by a school that they were no longer, because when we added the other schools, when we added new schools, we didn't really redistrict correctly. It was more, we wanted to redistrict according to socioeconomic, that everyone was the same. But now it's going to have to be, we're going to have to get the kids that are closest to the schools to help with the transportation costs. And, so there's just new data that surfaces that we think, okay, we didn't know about that. We didn't know about this. And now we're learning, and we're asking more questions, because when you're a new trustee, you just think, I don't want people to know how much I don't know. Mm-hmm. And so I'm just going to sit here and now, we've been there, I think for at least 4 years. It's our youngest trustee. And so we're asking those hard questions because we need to, and our community is asking those questions. And we're like, yeah, so how does this work? You can't make everybody happy. And since May 21st, it's been really hard for me as the chair, because I feel heavy for my community. My heart is heavy. I'm teachers are my heroes. Oh, and I am here because of my teachers. And so, and administrators, I know that it's really hard and rough for them. But the kids, and that's what I've said before, the integrity for the kids' education is the last thing that needs to be messed with. And, how can we do this with the least, the least harm for the kids? And even moving a kid to a different school that they weren't ready for is trauma. Because I was a migrant kid, and moving every year back and forth, starting school 3 times a year, was really hard. And, and And so I know that. And you don't pick up friends as easy. Your cliques are made and your teachers are different. And you're always thinking, I wish things hadn't changed. And then we know that our kids' mental health is worse than ever. And so, those are things that I'm thinking about. And I'm listening to administrators, and I get people that will call me and how are we going to do this without, safety aids? How are we going to do this without, sports? Because if we get rid of sports, we will lose kids, because that's, it takes everything, education, sports, your religious activities, community involvement, all of that to make a real well-rounded child. And so you just think, oh, how do you make sure that is not touched, because it's so significant in the life of a child and in a family, and we have to touch it because we lost a supplemental levy, and we have to. But we're trying to do the best that we can. We're trying to remain positive, trying to keep our administrators positive, and we were going to do this, and so it's. And sometimes, I get it from all areas, and I just think, okay, I wish I had a magic wand, a crystal ball, win the win the lottery, because I could totally, that would be just change, right? Yeah. $4.1 million. But then we face reality and think, okay, now we have to, talk to the community. We're going to take input. We're going to take their comments. And I know a lot of them will be upset. But like we said, the community has spoken. And, and then the thing we can do is, get more involved so this doesn't happen again, be more knowledgeable, help, pass the word. You got to vote. You got to vote yes. And that's one of the things that as a trustee, because we're not paid employees, that we can advocate, because as long as we're not at the school or using any school materials or property, we can advocate. So I, went to chamber meetings. I'd go to different social, clubs in town and say, I would tell them, you need to vote yes. And our superintendent's like, whoa. And I'd call my friend Quinn Perry. I said, I could say that, right? And she goes, yes. As a trustee, as long as you're not using any of that, you can. And I said, okay. And so, because we got to be really careful too. And so, yeah, it's tough. I will keep working. And, we talk about how much work we do as a trustee. For me, it's really important that I don't just do meetings. I don't just do, sit with the superintendent to come up with the agenda for the meeting. I go to the events. I applaud the kids. I go to the schools. I talk to the kids in the hallway. I go, I judge their history lessons. I try to meet them. I try to say, honey, what's your name? Oh, it's Social Madeline. And I go, mijita, how does your grandma say your name? Xochitl Medellin. I said, well, you need to say your name that way, because that is your ancestors. You're giving honor to your ancestors. So don't change it. Say it the way it's supposed to be said. Mm-hmm. And then I'll see them 2 years, 4 years down the road, and they said, I will always remember you. So when we go back to the part of like, you didn't win your candidacy. No, but some kid saw me and said, she looks like me, and I could do that too some days when I grow up. So, whether I win or don't win, I'm used to losing. I'm used to not being the first one that gets picked, like back in kindergarten at Notice, Yeah. Mm-hmm. But, eventually I will get there. And some people tell me, well, your one vote isn't going to make a difference because the majority's not Democrat. And I said, yeah, but my story might. Or the fact that I'm there will make some other child think, I could be that because she made it. She's there. I could be that too. Mm-hmm. And that's all I want, is to give hope and to be, a representative, a really true representative. Mm-hmm. We have 15% of the population in the state of Idaho is Latino, but we don't have 15% of our legislators Latinos. We have one. and that is Sonia. Yeah, Dr. Sonia Lavis.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, she's great. I would call Sonia a friend.
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely.
She's great. And one of the things that I really appreciate about her and people who are similar to her in that they want to work with people, they want to have the conversations.
Yeah.
And when it comes to being a community leader, we really need to have those tough conversations. We need to have the courage to have them. And I think part of that courage is showing up and acknowledging that, like, I might not say this the best way. I'm going to say it how I know how. And if someone needs to help me understand maybe a little bit more, right, to help me broaden my knowledge, I want someone who's going to show up who in their kindness is going to care, and I'm not going to get defensive when that happens. I mean, I remember I put something out on social media because I was just getting involved in this group, this Idaho Adoption Coalition, that also works with kids in foster care. And I had I put something out there, and it was meant to be like helpful. And one of the things I said was like, yeah, I really appreciate the courage it takes adoptive parents to give their kids like up for adoption. I use that phrase. And I didn't think anything of it. Like, no one had ever said anything to me. I had heard people use that phrase, give kids up for adoption. Well, a woman messaged me on social media and she was like, hey, I think your post is great. I just want you to know that actually the phrasing that you're using, we're not using that anymore because we want to denote love and respect for the child and for the parent. So we use the phrase place child for adoption. They place them for adoption. It was an intentional choice of love. And I messaged her back and I was like, thanks for telling me, because I didn't know. And I went and changed it. I was like, I took that down and I put it back up with the language that she had helped me understand.
Yes.
And that's what I feel like. I mean, even me, I remember it was at a national PTA meeting, convention. I was, and I attended this, it was like, like a diversity and inclusion workshop. And there were all sorts of people there of all sorts of colors, and, men and women were there. And and it was run by two men. And one of the things that they asked at the beginning was, have you ever gone into a space, a meeting, and felt intimidated or worried to say something that might be offensive to someone else of a different race than you? Like every hand in the room went up. And like, as a white woman, I was like, well, yeah, I'm going to raise my hand. I've been intimidated. Like, I've been worried, but like Hispanic people's hands went up. African-American hands went up, and then people started talking. And this one Hispanic woman was like, I've been nervous when I walk into some meetings and I see people who don't look like me, because I think, gosh, I don't want to say something that's going to offend them. And it was interesting because as a young mom, that had never crossed my mind. I actually hadn't thought that someone else would be intimidated to be around someone like me, because I just was like, well, I'm not offended. Like, yeah, we're all just here learning. And so it was so interesting to hear her perspective. And what that taught me was we all have those insecurities and worries and those thoughts in our head that we might say something and fumble and get it wrong. But the point isn't to always be right. For me, the point is to have the courage to try to connect, to try and have those conversations and say, you know what, I'm going to show up in my flaws. And I'm hoping that someone else shows up with courage and kindness too, to help me learn along the way.
Yes.
And that's what I love about some of these people who are our community members.
Yes.
That they want to show up. They want to show up with their courage and kindness, understand their community, and make decisions based on what their community is telling them. And so in the West Ada School District, they were trying to do, it was that plant facilities levy over a year ago, or about a year ago. It was actually May. It was May in 23. It was a 10-year, $500 million, unprecedented in the state of Idaho. And it failed hard. Yeah. And one of the things that I got invited to participate in, and lots of community members were invited, was that district administration said, we want to understand from our community why you voted no. We need to hear from you. And so they kind of pulled in different people who were leaders in lots. I mean, they had lots of community listening sessions to understand the why. And there was one district employee that I remember who heard a lot of hard things that day. And he took it so well. He was like, I'm here to listen. I'm here to learn. And there was respect, right? It wasn't like people were, rude and stuff, but they were there to listen and learn from their communities. And that's what I feel like we need from our school board members. Our school board members need to have the courage to show up in their communities, right? And you're saying like, well, the community said no. We need to understand why they said no, because we actually need this money to function as a district.
Right.
It's actually not even enough, but it's like going to help us just kind of move along on this. But we need to figure out why, because we need this to pass in November.
Yes. That's great. That's something I'm going to take back.
Yeah,
that's great. We talk about town hall meetings where, we need to make sure that we listen to our community and not limit them, we sometimes do have a limit because we want to hear as many people as possible. But you're right. That is a good idea. I'm going to take that back with me. And it's, you have some great points. I have a lot of respect for the Boise School District. There are some amazing people on that board, and you always think you pick people. You go, okay, I like how they speak. I like their mentality. I like how they think, and a lot of times too, we tend to sometimes sugarcoat things. That okay, and we can't be a Pollyanna all the time. We've got to tell people and we need to learn, and we need to hear the hard truths. We need to hear them. We need to also tell them this is the hard truth. And sometimes people are like, whoa, I didn't know that. And you need to hear that, because we can't just generalize things and take them for, just to make the situation go away or feel better about what happened or our decisions that we make. We have to make sure that we listen to everybody. And that's one thing, like I said, I've always been happy to be in committees. I've always been happy to, when they say, okay, we're going to break up into groups. You can't be with somebody that you don't know. And I go, oh, that's my favorite part, because I get to be with people that are from other parts of the state or just listen to them. And but then I feel comfortable being a leader. Okay, like this is what they're asking us to do. We got to do this. So what do you guys think? But I will listen. I will always listen, because, and I have kids, adult kids who, will put me in my spot in the sense of like, okay, you have to share the microphone, Mom. You can't just hoard it. I'm like, okay, fine. And they keep me, knowing that, you have to be that person. And so I'm grateful for them. You learn a lot from your kids. And we tell you what, when they grow up, just like, okay, I guess you're right this time again.
Yeah. I know kids definitely can keep a parent very grounded in reality. Yes. Yeah, it's true. So, okay, well, this has been a really awesome conversation today. I've really enjoyed your insights and what you bring to your board and what you bring to your community. And at the end of every episode, I always do 2 takeaways. Like, what are you taking away from the conversation? What did you like maybe it's like a main point or something that you felt or something like that. And I ask my guests to do one and I do one. Would you like me to go first or second? I'm already said that.
You go first.
I'll go first. Okay. So one of the things that I'm taking away from this conversation today is that I'm trying to figure out how to say this, because I just was so moved. I was so moved by your story. And I think this is a space I know as the state PTA president, one of the things that we're working on is trying to reach out to more communities that are not on our state board, that are not, or maybe even like underrepresented in our local communities. And one of the things that you shared just about your experiences as a child and how that informed you as an adult, like you really did learn how to be an advocate when you were a kid. And that has been a gift for you as an adult and has helped you in the position that you're in today. It makes me think about all the kids in Idaho whose parents just need to be invited and need to be given help. Like, you can do this. We want you here because your voice matters in what we're doing. And that's something that I've really been touched by today, that you had educators that helped you see the value and the knowledge that you had as a human being when you were a teenager and as a young kid. And then you had a friend who helped you have the courage to say, yes, I can do this thing too. I bring value to the table. And that now then helps you be where you are today. And I want to be the type of person in my community, especially as the leader of this nonprofit, who is working to intentionally give my other leaders around the state that knowledge and that perspective of the need to reach other people and bring them in.
Yes.
That's what I'm taking away from today.
That's good. Yes. Yeah. And your point at the end, and it's, when there's defeat, you're looking for excuses, right? You're looking for excuses like, why? What did we do? We know what we could have done better. We're going to go forth and do this. But the perspective of reaching out to the community of, why did you vote no? And not be scared of the answers, or either use it as a way to educate, use it as a way to realize how we are not doing enough as a school district to educate our community, or realizing that we need to have more town hall meetings where, we can speak to our community members. That's important, because it's kind of like, when I was growing up and my dad had the say so, and, and you're like, but wait, but I want to say, but no, that's the end. That's it. You did what you did, and now you're going to be chastised or whatever, and it's important, because we don't want to create division. There's enough division. We want to be a better community. And I think that I was like, oh, okay, I'm going to go back to my board in my school district, and we're going to have a talk about that and make sure that, we do that. And, and sometimes it takes us being pulled out of our community and putting in different spaces to realize those things. Because when you're surrounded by comfortableness, you tend to sit there and not think out of the box. So yeah, that's what I'm taking back. I'm excited.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time today. We are recording early on a Saturday morning. So yes. Thank you for working this into your schedule. You have been fabulous, and I just wish you guys all the best moving forward. And if there's any way I can be helpful, you let me know.
Okay. Thank you for having me. This has been a lot of fun. Thank you.
Awesome.